Hello, this is Fernando, and this is Digital Crafters, a podcast where I have conversations with independent artists, designers, and developers who are making a living out of their digital creations. Whether it's a piece of digital art, a tool, a video game, these people have found a way to dedicate themselves to the projects they own and love. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Alejandro Leon. He's a fantastic designer, developer. He's an entrepreneur. He's the founder of Spline.design. Spline.design is a 3D modeling tool based on web technologies that's changing the game for 3D modeling. It's basically like using Figma or Sketch, but for 3D. We're going to be talking about discipline, burnout, and what it takes to create a product like Spline or any other project that you may have. I hope you enjoy this episode. I'm sure I did. So, yeah, I it's really interesting like how Spline has really just like boomed. I mean, that's how I kind of felt it. Like all of a sudden, I saw this tool and like every like if like quote unquote influencer within the technology industry like started like posting about it, and I was like, oh, this is a great tool. Like this is a great idea.
Mm.
But
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise for us as well. It definitely was not what we were expecting to happen. um, yeah, uh, we launched on December, and we were expecting, maybe a couple of hundreds users. Um, yeah, in the first week we got several thousands of users, and it was, oh my god, something's happening here. Yeah.
crazy. So it's actually I wasn't expecting for you to say that. I thought that you kind of had it like planned out, like, like we have to, hit like this number of users and like, you know.
um no, I have been like in kind of the startup ecosystem for a while. um there is a bunch of stuff that you try to plan, but at the end of the day, it's just hypotheses, right? um it's really hard to predict, especially when you're doing something that is kind of new for a space. There is hypothesis, and you try to predict, and you try to get ready, like, let's have a really good backend, let's have a really good um preparation. But at least in my experience, it's really hard. And in the case of Spline, it was like a surprise what happened. Definitely, the numbers that we were expecting were much lower, and so it was like a nice surprise. And everything went, the everything that could have happened, and like the registration stopped working in the first hours, and a bunch of people were like, I cannot sign up, the registration form is not working. And we were just like crazy, like, oh my god, it's just not going well. But yeah, we managed to fix the errors very quickly, and then it went well. Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember because I was one of those people that like was like scrolling to the through the tweets saying like, because I like, oh, I didn't receive the email. Like, I mean, like it was just a ton of people like having that. But like, yeah, it was also very cool to see that you guys were like actively like answering those and like taking care of things. It was really cool.
Yeah, we were like, we need to fix this thing fast, and we need to answer every single, because I also know what it means when no one answered you, right? So it's not nice when there is not support, there is no one, there for you to solve the problems. And I was really worried about that. I tried to, in that day, it was only me actually replying. So I
Oh
tried to
wow.
to reply as much as I could. And we were just, um, before the launch, we were just, making all sort of changes, trying to fit the biggest amount of books before launching, and something must have go broken. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were launching that, like how many people were in your team?
I think by the time we launched, we were about 6 or 7 on the team. Yeah, yeah, it
Oh,
was.
okay.
We were not, small, but normal, I think.
So I'm kind of going to jump back in time and like really long time ago, a few years ago. So you told me you grew up in Venezuela.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and you went to the university there and studied design, right?
Yes. Yes. I studied a couple of years, design, graphic design, basically, and then I drop out. I never finished the career. Yeah.
Yeah, were you like anxious to build a lot of things, or like yeah, like have you always wanted to like create stuff?
I do. Yes. I actually I I get to into 3D very very early in my age. I believe. My parents, they bought AutoCAD book, and they have, I don't know, they had AutoCAD installed on their computers. I think this is, I don't know, Windows 98 or something. I don't quite remember very well what. Um, and then and I got like this book, and this book like, well, what is all these really nice illustrations here, right? A bunch of industrial design illustrations about doing stuff in AutoCAD. Everything was on English, and I was super curious about that. My parents, they never actually did anything in AutoCAD. It was just, I don't know, I don't know how they actually came into the idea of getting into that. Probably my father, because my father was very curious about software.
Mm.
Um, my both of my parents, they study um, uh, programming. They never really exercised the career. They dedicated to education, both of them. But very early in my childhood, I was surrounded about, programming and different kind of software. So I guess that somehow influenced that, my way at the end through learning about this, 3D. And then later I got my PlayStation 1, and was a birthday gift, I think. Um, and I remember making this connection. Oh, these 3D graphics kind of look like the AutoCAD graphics. Maybe there is some sort of software to create this sort of stuff. And it was like, I don't know, it was like 13 or something. And I asked my dad, why don't we, can we just go and try to see if there is some sort of software for 3D creation, because someone must be doing this, right? And we moved to a different state on a weekend, and we go and find a place where they were selling software. It was actually pirate software, because that's, in Latin American countries, it was like a
Yeah.
very common stuff. Um, and we find like these CDs for Maya and a bunch of other software. And what is this? It was really like mind blowing, all these software. And so I asked my dad to get some of these, and then I started learning about this stuff, like, Maya, Cinema 4D, 3D Maths. Um, and it was, I just, it blew my mind, like, you were able to create such amazing stuff. And then I spent all my my teen my year as a teenager just learning about 3D. Um, and every single day I asked my dad to draw me to a cyber coffee. So because we didn't even had internet, so I um, and I was I needed to move far from the place where I live because it was a very rural area. So every single day for many years, I spent like 4 hours in a cyber coffee after school, just learning about this 3D software, and I just love it. It's just a wonderful. I think 3D is a wonderful space for creativity. Yeah, and later, then I got into university and studied design. It was actually my second career. I studied telecommunications, non-related, mostly because we didn't have enough money to get. I didn't have enough money to pay for a design career because the design careers were only on private universities. So I got selected by a national university for free, right? And the only careers that they were offering was this career, which was kind of close to my city, my town. And it was not the other way. It was the only way that I could get into the university back in the time, and doing something that could potentially enable me to do a job. At least that was what I thought and what my parents thought. But I dropped out the year after that because I spent my entire year just keep learning about 3D, and I was not actually doing anything related to the career. So I just thought, this is not for me. And I got into the design school, and I started working part time and trying to help and paying for the education. Um, and yeah, it was like my first time um, getting into a private university, and I was like super worried about being responsible and doing things right, because it was the first time I was asking my parents to pay me for this. And so I was working, I was doing design, I was learning about many stuff, and yeah, it was a very fun, intense couple of days.
It reminds me a lot of myself too, because I also dropped out of high school.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and I finished it like I was doing exams only for high school, um, and then like I joined the university as a listener, and I just hated it and just left it. Um, so yeah, and it was pretty much for the same reason. Like I felt like I wasn't learning anything that I wanted to learn. So yeah, it's interesting to listen to that.
I really like design as a profession, right? As a focus in work. But I did notice that the stuff that they were teaching on my country, on this university, it was just far from being what it was actually happening in the world, right? It was
Yeah.
very outdated. um, so I just decided, well, I have been learning by myself for many years, so I just keep doing that, right? So I drop out. Obviously, everyone, when you try to drop out from something, everyone around you is like, hey, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just did it anyways, and my parents were very much supportive. So I'm very grateful about that. And yeah, quickly after that, I started working by myself. I started working with one of my teachers, actually, who offered me a job, and later we became best friends, and he's one of my best friends in life in general. So yeah.
And what was the job? Like, was it a design job or a 3D modeling job?
We were doing just freelance work for web design. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So it was it was one of the first times that I get into doing web design as part of a job. I had experience working with freelance work for doing posters and
Mm.
um, design identities, and then there was this client they wanted to do something, and I was already learning a little of HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and let's do it. And I learned a lot, actually, a bunch of stuff, very fun, and the outcome of that was terrible. The actual result, it was terrible. It was like the worst thing ever, but it was the first time, so
Why was it terrible?
I just I was very new doing that,
Mm.
and I didn't have experience, and
Yeah.
obviously the result was not going to be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's always the case, especially when you are a self-taught person. Like you do the things the way that you think you can do them.
Yeah, yeah. You make a lot
Yeah.
of mistakes, right? Someone else
Yeah.
going to use the work that is a mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And how long were you freelancing?
Not much. So a friend and I, Samuel is his name. We work on a couple of projects. We were, trying to find, different clients. Um, and then we met some folks. We applied for one of our friends knew about this accelerator. It was like a startup accelerator. So I was like 19 or 20 or something. Um, like there was this idea of basically it was like an entity that put money on you so you can work on your ideas. And it was the first time that we were like four, and we applied to an accelerator called Wida. It was like an initiative from a telecommunication company called Telefonica, which is actually very well known in Latin America. Um, is they also manage Movistar, which is another kind of brand, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then we learned about structuring a project, structuring an idea as a project that you can pitch to someone else so they can evaluate and see if there is enough potential so they can put money on your idea, and then you can work towards that. We even record like a video. We make like a website, and the whole idea was about making an smart bus. So it was basically making a smart bus, and I did all the graphics for the website, and other of the team members were like engineering, so we were like brainstorming, and it was a very fun exploration. But we were not selected. Yeah, we were not selected. We learned about that, but we failed. And later, we met another team. We try again, and we failed it again. And then it was not until the third time that we actually got, I think a year or two later, I don't even remember right now, that we got into there, and then we learned a bunch of things about how a startup is, and we were building on that. So yeah, I spent a lot of time learning about creation of products and designing products and building physical products and building digital products. And it was not until like 3.5 years ago that I actually started like working on a spline. because it was like the idea for Spline actually came when I was dropping out from university, because I realized most people, most people I knew in the creative space, they wanted to create 3D, but it was so hard for them to get into the 3D space. Like you needed to learn how to use Maya and Blender and all these tools, and it was very different than learning Photoshop or Illustrator, right? The learning curve was very high. And so people got disappointed, like, oh my God, this is not for me. I'm not going to spend 1 year learning Maya. That's, and I just thought, it was a very early idea, but I just thought, why don't we just build a simpler 3D tool, right? But surprisingly, never really, no one really ever focused on solving that problem. Most 3D tools were just pushing and pushing new features. No one really focused on, hey, this is a very this is a user experience problem, right? It's really hard to understand how to um, and there was also other things happening, like there is like an entire industry around the idea of learning 3D. Like, it's so hard that there is people that make their living out of teaching how to overcome these hardships into learning 3D. So it kind of makes sense that no one really tried to focus on that, because there was already kind of like this alternative solution, which is, okay, so it's hard learning 3D. Why don't you just get a 3D course and then you learn, right? But I just thought, the problem is not education. The problem is the way that we think about making a software. I didn't know how to code at all. I mean, aside from writing HTML code, so I learned it to go over the time, over the years. To make a lot of time just understanding how to make an application, something that makes sense.
Crazy. So you actually like you had that idea back when you dropped out of school, and
Yeah.
like you started basically preparing yourself, like learning how to do things. Like I'm guessing, like oh, like I need to learn how this piece of technology works that could be useful for what I want to do, or was it more like yeah, like how was that?
Oh, well, it was more like so I had the idea for Spline, and the first time back in the time I dropped out, and I have like a bunch of ideas that I wanted to explore. Um, and I just I really like designing interfaces. Back in the time, I actually was doing I did like a redesign of the Explorer of Windows.
Oh, nice.
And I was doing like I really like the idea of designing interfaces. I tried to design different interfaces, and I tried to redesign or rethink like different software that I was using, just like as a way of learning about design, because um, designing an interface is a very complex design problem, right? You need to learn how to create icons. You need to learn how to create layouts and compositions. So uh, I had this idea about improving my own skills by creating this kind of stuff. So, and then I came up with this idea for Spline, because obviously if I'm going to work on something, and I noticed this problem, and I focus on designing the first idea for Spline, right? And so I actually have, I think I still have the initial drawings for Spline. I think it's like 10 years old drawings. um, and I showed this to someone, my friend. I think it was a very early project, and yeah, but I didn't know how to code, so I started learning about JavaScript, right? Like JavaScript was like actually before that I tried before to learn how to code in Python, because Python was like very new back in the this is like 10 years ago. So Python right now is very much standard, but 10 years ago there was Python 3, if I'm not mistaken. and people were starting to think about Python as one of the important languages for the future. So I was moving around, everywhere I go, I had like my manual for Python. I was, I tried to learn how to code in Python for the first time. I failed it terribly. It was not for me, and then I tried to learn JavaScript, and I kind of failed it again terribly. Yeah, and so it really took me like 7 years or something to learn how to code. It was a very different and very hard, um, but at the end, that was the way I started. Like, I later learned a little of coding in C sharp, which is the language that you use on Unity, and we were using a lot of Unity to create AR experience. On a company that a couple of folks and I co-founded. We were basically creating AR experience, and the way that you do it was mostly using Unity, um, and the main language in Unity is basically C sharp. So I kind of tried to learn a little of C sharp and did a couple of explorations on games, and apps like that. Published a couple of, I think I published an app, and build a game. So it was basically doing things just for learning. Um, and at the end, all of that is helpful because you find ways of doing things, and it's like an accumulation of knowledge, right? So by the time I started working on Spline, I already had like this accumulation of knowledge from different,
Tools.
areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. I was gonna ask you about that. Like, when did you started learning code? So
Yeah,
that's really cool.
it's just, across several years, probably 9 or 8 years. Yeah, it was my focus was never really becoming a programmer. And I already knew a lot about visual coding through no interfaces. Like, a lot of created tools use no systems to define, you know simple logic. And I really like the idea of understanding more about logic, and I really like the idea of math. I love math, and the mathematical approach to things. I always like it, because I like geometry. So geometry is like a visual representation of mathematical operations, and I try my best to learn about this, just so I can try building real things. Because it was so annoying that everything that you do on design is basically an image. It's never a real product, right? So you're constantly working on some sort of mod code. I mean, it's really nice because basically it's what is the basis for something that you can build. But I was interested in building the final outcome, and so I try a bunch of different approaches to creation, and yeah, so that led me to learning a bunch of stuff over the years. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So you were kind of like obsessed with like wanting to make your mocks come true, like actually have them exist and
Yeah.
usable and awesome. And how did you transition into more of the business oriented mindset? Because you said you got into like this startup scene and gave it a few tries, and then you went into that PlayQ company. So like, how did you transition into that?
Yeah. Yeah. So uh, we met a couple of folks, and they had a background also in engineering and physics and many different backgrounds, and we co-founded a company under the idea of building AR. Um, and I was mostly on the design side of things. Like, I was working on, I already had a bunch of knowledge in terms of 3D by the time. and I was super interested about building, something that it was aligned with the future, right? Um, so for many years, we were working on ideas that no one has never, was not paying much attention. The AR back in 2014 was not something that most people was paying attention for. Um, but I never liked the idea of being an employee. So from the
Okay.
very beginning, I tried to get involved in all different areas. I mean, I was not the CEO. I was, the chief of design, which is the um, but I like the idea of getting involved in how everything works, because I always like to understand, like, how things were there. And so at the end, I was very much involved in hiring people and looking for people that can join the team. And I was always looking for people, even if they were not in my background, like on design. I try to find people that can join the team, and I really enjoy, finding people. And um, some of the team members were a little shy. It was hard for them to communicate. But I just like to, meet new people. And it was like that for many years. And we applied to another accelerator, which is here in Chile, that is called Startup Chile. And then we learned a bunch of the ecosystem of Latin America. And we moved to Chile. We learned a lot about raising capital for a company, right? Raising, money so you can actually continue working on it. Raising money from strangers, basically.
Yeah.
um, um, we were a team of 6 or 7, and we were working on, for many years on trying to push into the direction of initially advertising and AR, and then we spin off into education, like AR for education. Um, and try to learn as much as I can in terms of business, in terms of product creation. Um, so yeah, by the time that I started working on Spline, I already had, these, you know, again, accumulated knowledge over the years about what is a startup, how you raise money, how things work. And I always wanted to get into the Silicon Valley ecosystem, which is very different from the Latin American ecosystem. I was never able to do that in Playco because it's really hard, and most people never talk about it. But when you define hierarchies on a company, um, there is constraints, right? So I was never able to take bold decisions in terms of business because there was someone else doing that, right? So for many years, I tried to work on something we could try to that we can use into getting into the Silicon Valley ecosystem, but it was hard, right? There is a vision, there is a bunch of work in progress that at the end of the day, unless you start your own company, it will be otherwise really hard. So I needed to do that. So I started my own company. I registered Spline on Delaware, on United States, and decided to focus on that. But it was a really, really hard transition because I was already working for so many years in the other company, and so many responsibilities. So the first time it took me about 2 years to actually transition since the very beginning, since the time that I decided I needed to focus on my stuff to the time where I actually leave the company. It was like 2 years. I was so confused. I didn't know how to do stuff without my previous thing. It was so confusing. Um, but at the end, things go well if you focus on something that you like. I believe that was what happened with Spline so far.
So all this time that you were working on different projects, did you had like a full time job, a part time job? Were you freelancing, or were you like 100% working on those projects?
Oh no, yeah. When we were working on AR, I was 100% of that. and it was, my it was a full-time job, right? Spline initially was a side project, something that I did on the nights, 2 hours every single day on the night, and then on the weekends. So it was for the first couple of years, Spline was just a side project. And then I asked for a bank loan because I needed help, but I could not spend my own time because I was already committed. Um, and then I asked for a bank loan, and then I found Jenny, which she was like the first hire. So I hired Jenny, and we worked together for like 2 years. And I was accumulating a debt, which is not a good idea. Yeah, so it was it was really hard. I was spending money that was not mine. But I just thought that it was so, for me in my mind, it was such a good idea that I just wanted to pursue the idea, even though I was in a very critical situation. Um, and then, the first thing I did once I, left Playku and they were working on was just looking for funding, because I needed, if I'm going to focus 100% of this, I needed money to be able to move fast, right? Computer
Yeah.
graphics is really hard. You need, a good team, and I focus on that, and all the ideas that I wanted to implement for many years, I was able to implement on the spine, right? Going to Silicon Valley, understand the ecosystem, doing the ways in the way that I thought it was probably, and that was it, right? It was not, at the end, it was not so hard, but it did require taking a big of risk in order to do so.
Fascinating. Yeah. It's crazy, like, because that's quite a huge step to, like, quite a leap of faith, like, to believe in a project like that, which, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because it's a great product indeed. And so, like, yeah, taking the
I
leap
hope
and
so. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. Like, it's definitely, I mean, because I'm one of your audience in that sense. Like, I'm one of that people that, like, oh, like, I like to use Figma and I like to use Sketch, and I know a little bit about Blender. Like, I've done a few things there, but it's just like, man, I just get so lazy about it because it's just like so many commands and so many things to learn. And like when I saw Spline, I was like, wow, this is exactly what I needed. Like, I just want to build 3D stuff and, like,
Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah, it's
when was the
that's
first time that you when was the first time that you tried to do 3D?
the first time I tried to do 3D, I think I was like 12 years old, 13 years old. No, 13 years old, and I wanted to make video games. And so I downloaded,
Oh, got it.
yeah, so I downloaded Game Maker, but 3D in Game Maker was really hard. And then I tried, there was like a thing called 3D Game Maker. I think it was like literally something like that. and
Yeah, you're right. It might be, yeah.
and it was a very limited thing. Like, it was more like a level editor with, like, terrain tools, and, like, you can, like, you could add, like, a defined set of assets. And like, that was fun, but I was like, no, I want to create my own things. And I just reached the bottleneck there because I just didn't know what to do, and, like, the computer that I had was not even powerful enough to, like, try other stuff. So, like, I think the very first time that I tried to do 3D graphics was with, like, Game Maker. Like, I gave it a second try, and I was following tutorials on how to do 3D stuff. And but it was, like, very ugly and basic 3D stuff. And then later on, like a few years later, I tried Blender, and I tried to stick with it.
Mm.
I managed to make, like, two games, like, first person games with, like, flat graphics. Like, the only 3D models were for the buildings and like some some assets that were static, but like the characters were like flat billboards basically. And I worked on those with my cousin. Actually, he drew the graphics and I made the models and I programmed the thing, and it was really fun. But that's like like I've used it later on freelancing stuff, but like
You were
not
using
very professional.
the game engine from Blender?
No, I didn't. I tried to do that, but like Blender was confusing enough like to like even add something else to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It's really hard. Yeah, it is really hard to get, in 3D, and also in gaming. It's really hard to,
yeah,
if you don't have some sort of background, it's even harder, right? So you need to do a lot of research, a lot of learning by yourself.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like for me, I don't know. Like I just felt like if like making 2D games is very easy. Like I do like geometry. Like I do like like linear algebra and like so I felt like if it's easy to make 2D games, like why is it so hard to make 3D games? Like isn't it like the same but like a little different, like
Yeah, yeah. It's just one more dimension.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It turns
Yeah.
out, yeah, is also one order of magnitude harder. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, for sure. And like ever since, yeah, like I reached the bottleneck like on game development and like 3D graphics in general, and I just like went more on the like UI design path, and I tried to become a designer, but I also kind of failed at that, so I became a web developer.
nice.
Yeah, front end
Nice.
web developer. So yeah,
It's in the
yeah,
same neighborhood. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like the I don't know if do you know about Steven Pressfield? It's like an
Steven
author.
who also?
Pressfield, I think it is. He's the author of The War of Art, not to be confused
No, I
with
haven't.
The
I
Art of
haven't
War.
read it. I
Yeah,
haven't read it. No.
it's a very fun read and very it's like super helpful. It's like the way that I see it, it's like poetry that talks about like creative resistance, and it throws like a few tips on like how to deal with it basically. And I forgot why I was talking about that guy. I don't remember what I wanted to tell you about that, but oh yeah, look, so like yeah, so like he has this concept of like shadow careers, and a shadow career is like the career you follow because you were not able to like go for the thing you wanted to go for.
Oh. Oh, interesting analogy.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, I just recently learned about that, and like it also applies to um, like you want to like maybe this podcast is kind of like that. Like it's like something you do because you want to do the things that you talk about but you don't do them, kind of like being a coach about something but not doing those things, kind of. Yeah. So
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
on that line of thinking, what do you think about like motivation and discipline, and like do you think like which is more important?
Yeah. Good point. I strongly believe working on something that motivates you um, determines how disciplined you are into reaching the goal. Um, yeah, I mean, you can always be very disciplined into doing something that you don't care, but um, I believe that if you are really motivated into doing something, either because it can be just because it's your passion, or something that you have been doing so much before, or something you discover when you are motivated, you really get um, a structure about how to reach different milestones of your idea. And I personally try to do a lot. I try to organize my personal goals into milestones that reachable milestones, right? Because there are like milestones that you know yes, let's go to the moon, right? But it's um and structuring is important to make realistic goals that you can actually achieve. And I learned this very early, actually, from learning about animation. So very early when I was learning 3D, I wanted to become a 3D animator, and I read a lot of books about 3D animation and about the process of, because 3D animation is so hard that you need to be really patient and disciplined about things. Um, I never really ended up becoming an animator, but I kind of understood the idea of focusing on something that you really wanted and having a structure into to reach the goals. Um, and I for many years I tried to follow that. Every single time I try to learn something new, I try to be very structured about it. And so, for example, if I was building like a mini game, I try to start the at some point, work on it, on 2 hours every single day, until 3 months later I have an idea, and then I publish, right? And I did that with several personal projects. But it's really hard, right? Most of the time you start something, and then you you live, it's like on the graveyard of ideas. um, but when you actually follow a process, even if the outcome is not perfect or good or nice, you have this satisfaction at the end that motivates you to do more stuff. Like, oh my God, this game or this idea is so terrible, but I was able to complete it. And it motivates you to be. It also opens your mind to the fact that you can actually build stuff by your own. Like, you know, oh, you didn't need that much help, right? You always need help. There is someone always helping. Um, but sometimes there are goals that you can achieve by yourself, and they can get actually very complex, and but still achievable by yourself. So yeah, I totally believe in motivation as a driving force for creation at the end.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think that other aspect of what you said, like having like smaller sections, like smaller milestones that you can jump from each other. Yeah, and like prove yourself that you can finish things. I think that's something that makes a lot of sense, because I that's actually something that I've thought a few times about, and like, like how many projects have I actually finished? Like from start to finish, and it's just like a very handful of things, and which is better than nothing, right? But yeah, I think I read an article from Derek Yu. Like he's a game developer. He's a creator of Spelunky.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, and he was saying that there were like archetypes of game developers, but I think it applies to any creative endeavor. And and there was one which was like the inventor or something like that. And the thing about that archetype is that he constantly creates prototypes. Like it's just so fun to make something that looks nice and kind of like works, but like then you kind of get to the dip, and you are like it becomes hard and tedious, and you have to like just push basically on stuff. Like it's not so fun, and like that's usually when that archetype just drops it and starts something new, right? So yeah, I've recently kind of like became self-conscious about that. um but yeah.
I suppose that's the biggest difference between working on a personal project than working on on a company, right? On something that it's a higher level of complexity. Um, you need to work on stuff that you don't really like but are needed, in order to move forward into something that you do like, right? I'm talking about, it's not only about building a product, but also understanding the legal component, understanding the business component or marketing. And so, um, that's, you need to take the lead, you need to jump from just building what you want to building something that is a balance between doing stuff that you want and stuff that you need to do, because that's how reality works. Like a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff that already are there that need to follow a process that someone else invented sometimes, because it is how things work in the world. So yeah, it's obviously it's really hard, because you now you need to find motivation. you know you need to structure your mental model, your way of thinking, in a way that you get motivated to do this sort of stuff that you don't really like to do but are needed.
Yeah. Okay. So is that what you do? Like when you face those moments where like, oh man, I have to do this, but like, what do you tell yourself, or do you just like jump right into it, no questions asked?
I really I try to and I have been thinking about this recently a lot. I try to structure different kind of work towards different days on the week. And so I know that on a particular day, because there is also a bunch of stuff that you do in a company, right? You need to have meetings, you need to review work, you need to so you need to have a structure for all kind of work on the company. But when it happens to be your own work, I found that I like to do it, in a way that I know that on a particular time I will be only focused on that, and I try to focus on that for whatever the amount of time that is needed. And then you need to be careful about, you need to try to eat, to sleep, and that's the harder part, right? Actually, right now that's the harder part. I struggle a lot to sleep, because there are so many things that you need to worry about, and it's hard to do it. It's hard to not be affected by the different responsibilities, even if everything is going well. Like right now, there is nothing wrong happening on the spine. Everything is going well in many ways, but I'm so worried about the future stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why is it, what is going to be happening next year? And just um so for that, I'm starting to learn that I might need to have like my own process of you know digesting the need of digesting the different information that is happening every day, so I can actually work efficiently, because otherwise it will be always stressful, right? Which is not ideal, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And have you experienced burnout?
I do. I do. I think burnout happens more. It's kind of weird, but I think burnout happens more when you're doing things that are not motivated to you, and not when you're doing a lot of stuff. Because, for example, you can do, if you're motivated into something, you can work, I don't know, 20 hours per day, right? For months, and you're not even burnt out. But I mean, at least in my experience, I get burnt out when I might be working, a normal amount of hours per day into something that is not motivated. And I feel like I'm working, I don't know, 24 hours per day, right? But I know I'm working the regular amount of time into something that I'm not motivated. And then I feel like, oh, this is, I mean, you want to, move away and do something else. And it happened to me before, right? On a previous projects I work on that, I just you start to notice that you don't feel right about it, like you don't feel that you are in the right path, and you're not
Mm,
reaching your goals. You're not satisfied about what you're doing. um yeah, so I think that's what burnout, when burnout happens. How is your
yeah.
experience on this?
Yeah, I think it's exactly like that. Like it's like whenever like the first time I experienced burnout um was on like my first job because I started like freelancing doing like graphic design for like my dad was he's like a consultant, and so like when I was a teenager I would do like graphic design for his clients and stuff like that. But like my first job as a developer was at a startup. So I was like the only developer and designer, and like like that kind of startup where you'd like do everything. And I moved to the office of the startup, and it was in a different city than my hometown. And I had to like I wanted to like there were some dates that we wanted to reach. We wanted to like finish the MVP for some dates because there were like some events, contests. In Mexico, it's called Lampari. Is that? I think I don't remember what the name of the event is, but like it's a big event on Guadalajara in Mexico, and there were like a few months where I was like just working all day and like all night and like just working, and I was living in like the actual office, like literally sleeping there. and and like we eventually like managed to create the MVP. um but it was more because I kind of experienced that sensation of like I was only in charge of the development part and I couldn't really step into the business part. But I was noticing that the founders were not agreeing with what they wanted, and they were not making up their minds with their business plan, and they were like
Hmm.
they were like they had different interests, right? And so the startup failed mainly because of that, because we did have an MVP, right? And they just like
Right.
didn't do the business work. And I felt that frustration, and I think that's what caused my burnout there, because I was feeling like I was working for nothing, like if I was on a sinking ship, and I was like, yeah, I'm still working on this ship, but it's sinking, like,
Right.
yeah. And like I actually reached the point where I was like, man, I don't want to ever develop
Yeah,
again.
yeah, I get the feeling. Yeah.
And I think, and like later on my different jobs that I've had, like there were some moments where I kind of felt that way too, like I'm working hard for something that I don't really believe in, or like for something that I'm not really,
Yeah.
something that I don't agree with or something like that. So I kind of became conscious of that, and now my take is like, whatever my next job is, like I'm going to make sure that it's something that's aligned with what I really want to do. I mean, my current job is kind of like that. It was kind of like a turn into more of the path that I want to go into, because yeah, I was more onto with the like corporate app development ecosystem, like front end developer, lots of JavaScript, React, Vue, etc. And I jumped into the agency industry, which is more like WordPress and headless and you know marketing sites, so on.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very different. It's a very different approach, right?
yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of like still trying things out and see what works and see what doesn't work, and yeah,
It takes time, right? It takes time to to focus on something that you feel like you're comfortable, right? Um, and I think
yeah.
it's okay that everyone take their time into finding the stuff they like, right? There is no pressure on that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's like a lot of cultural pressure on like, oh, you have to, like you have to be successful and you have to like do all these lots of things and like you have to be whatever X, Y, and Z. And yeah, so I think recently I've been more on like trying to like drop those things and be more like, no, like you don't have to do anything. Like you're fine. Just like do the stuff that you want to do, and but also like not letting that be an excuse to be like, oh, like I don't want to work right now on this, and I'm not like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think it's the same, right? As long as you are not, you know, inconvenience, you know, if you're not the inconvenience for someone else, I think, you know, you just take your whatever the time you want. I definitely came across many times where I feel like was not doing the stuff that I wanted, and you know, if you feel wrong, you know, there's some you feel wrong because it's, you know, it's like something in your brain is not matching, right? It's like um and it happened to me the first time. For example, I wasn't studying something that I wasn't really into very early. You know, it took me 1 year to take a decision, and then I was into learning design, which was more related to what I wanted, but still not quite. So it took me 2 years to um, to take the decision. Um, and then I was working on startup, and it was for many years interesting, but at the end I was not able to accomplish my own vision. So it took me like, many years into also. So it's really hard, right? It's really hard to find stuff that really motivates you, and you feel that you are in the right path.
yeah, for sure. And that would, and that thing that you said, like it took you many years. I think that's something that's really not very public in today's world. Like people think like, oh, like it's a overnight success or something like that, but it's not really like nothing is an overnight success. Like as you said, like you had been thinking about spline for like years and years behind, right? And like you had to go through a lot of things and preparation to basically get to the point where that blew up.
Yeah, and also actually, I'm not sure if this plan is a success, right? I think we are very much starting. You know, I think it's a success in being able to reach the goal where it's something real, right? For
Mm.
many years, it was just an idea that I had. Um, Now my goal is, now that Spline is real, I want Spline to be helpful for people. It was, to be an actual, tool that you can use for daily and can, be like your partner into creation process. Um, so it's is now, for me, success will be reaching this new milestone, right? I was super happy when we launched. It was very emotional. But then I felt okay. Now what's the next thing, right?
Yeah.
like and but it's exciting, right? It's exciting because you feel like finally the stuff that you thought for many times before um, are feasible, are possible if you focus on it, right? For any amount of time, it doesn't necessarily need to be years. It can be, weeks or months. Um, but it's really super powerful. I think that if you focus on something, you can actually make stuff. And a lot of people I know that they have many ideas, but it's hard for people to focus on something sometimes, right? It also requires discipline, motivation, and so it's really hard. Yeah.
I'm gonna like change subjects real quick. So I know that you are also like into game development and like that kind of thing. Um, so
Yeah, but
yeah, and I saw that. user interface that you created for Godot. I thought that was really cool.
No, yeah, that was like 5 or 6 years ago. Um, Again, I was just trying to learn about designing um, interfaces for game for a game app, and I saw Godot, and I looked for Godot, and it was like it was a very nice project. Godot is a Latin American project, and I felt identified by that. The vision was really nice, and I thought, I really want to do something for this, to contribute somehow to the open source community. So I did a couple of sketches, and I spent some time. By the way, I was doing this while I was working as a co-founder in something else, right? Because, like I said before, I really like, the only way in design that you can actually learn fast is that you need to build stuff, and you need to solve problems in different areas. And at least for me, it works every now and then working on something completely unrelated to what I'm doing.
Mm.
Working on that particular project was one of them. Like, I really wanted to work on something very different and try to learn a very different approach to design on the interfaces. So I work on that, and I studied a bunch of how Unity was built. And I tried to incorporate the best on Unity with some of the what I thought in the time were really good ideas from Godot. Um, and the post was very controversial, I believe, in the time. It has, I think, hundreds of comments. I don't remember. For many years, every years ever since I published that, I noticed that someone else like, "Hey, I did like a team," or "Hey, I did like." I really want this to happen. I really want, and finally they kind of implemented some of the ideas in Godot 3, which is really nice. But I felt like, it was not quite there. I felt like, I really believe like Godot, it can be really more impactful in the game industry if they spend more time into building a more a better design software, like visually speaking, right?
Yeah.
But well, open source communities are very hard to disrupt, right? Once everyone agrees on some vision for something, it's hard to get, hey, why don't you just make my own stuff? Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Especially design is really hard to get it right on open source, because most people in the open source communities believe design is, very subjective, and it's not.
Mm.
It's very objective, right? But people came from different backgrounds. People came from, they had different ideas, so it's really hard to for a designer, unless there is this mindset from the beginning. It's really hard. And we saw this happening on Blender, right? We saw this happening in other, software out there, where the design is, quite not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think you will at some point create an open source project, or are you or only interested in contributing in a different way?
I do. We had several plans actually, and on Spline, and and also on a personal level. I hope to contribute to open source community in the next months, years. Um, I do believe open source is the future for many things that we do right now. But I also believe that there is a space for privacy. Um, it's like, sometimes I feel people think open source, it's not the same open sourcing software and open sourcing your privacy, right? So I think there is value in different ways of thinking. There are things that are easier and faster to achieve under a private approach that I hope that we can somehow do in open source in one day. Um, but yeah, I really like the idea, but I had also bad experience in open source, right? Like sometimes people in open source community can be really hateful. You try to help into something, and then some people throw you very harsh comment, like um, like they say to you mean stuff, and because everyone is so emotional about what they're doing, and that can lead to misunderstandings, and that can lead to other people outside the community to get into the community,
Mm.
because it's like this happens a lot, by the way. For example, in 3D communities for open source, it's very reactive, very, people, if you do something wrong, like you forgot about following the guidelines, people really say mean things to you, right? Like, get out of here, this is not the place for you, it's really hard. And I feel like there is not enough discussion about this. There is a few people that over the years have been, talking about these hateful comments on GitHub, and nowadays there is more space for discussion. But for many years, it was really hard to get into any kind of discussion on GitHub unless you were really experienced into something. Um, at least that was my experience, right?
I've never, I have never contributed on any open source project. I would definitely love to do that. I've actually been thinking of participating in the Serenity OS. It's an operating system that a guy from Sweden, his name is Andreas. He's great. He like started working on this operating system, just like just for fun, and he like now it's like a big community of developers, and it's like I would love to like just jump in there and participate into something because they're building like it's kind of like a 90s style operating system, kind of like Windows 2000 and Windows 95.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, but yeah, getting back to the open source chat. Um, yeah, I don't know if you know about Svelte.
I know as well. I am in the Discord community. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, so like I think that's what their take was, right? Like for SvelteKit, like they worked privately for some time to be able to iterate fast.
Yeah, good point. I not so I don't know well the history of spell. But interesting. I didn't know that it was like that. Mm,
Very recently, yeah, for SvelteKit, because
interesting.
yeah, they wanted to like approach something in a very different way, or that's what I understood,
Mm,
and it was just like way faster for like the core team to work on something privately and then like open it up later,
mm.
which
It
I
makes
think they
sense.
just did.
It makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes sense. I really like spell. I had never made anything public, but I have like a couple of non-published projects that I work on as well. I like the overall idea. I know people from React communities don't like Svelte.
Yeah.
um, it's kind of, you are a traitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think React developers don't like other frameworks in general.
Yeah, React developers don't like a lot of stuff. Yeah. um, but yeah, I think the mindset, I think it's really cool, and it kind of pushed forward. And I think React right now it's basically um, you know, the advantage right now from Svelte to other frameworks is not the same as it was when it launched, right?
Yeah.
Which means that it really pushed forward the community, right, into thinking in, you know, the problems that Svelte was trying to solve. So I think it's a, you know, very important. At the end, all of these projects kind of contribute that we, you know, in different ways, so we ended up getting the best outcome, I think. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like we're all playing the same game to just get a better experience on the
yeah,
end,
and work,
right?
yeah, and work fast, and, you know, do things easier. Yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Well, it has been it has been a pleasure talking with you about all these different subjects about design and development and creativity and just work in general. I think it's really really cool. I did wanted to jump on a few other things like for example, I wanted to like chat a little about Studio Ghibli because I know that you're a big fan of them.
oh yeah. I love Ghibli. Yeah, sure, let's talk about that. I love Ghibli, man. I just in general, I came across Ghibli movies when I was teenager, and I just love it. You know, it's the meaning, you know, the moral teaching, um, far uh, from what it was being published in the time in the Western world, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's just so meaningful, and it was one of the main reasons that I actually was interested in learning about animation. I actually kind of learned a little about how hand drawing animation because of this, um, and did like a couple of, you know, my own personal hand drawing for a couple of years when I was into that. It's just beautiful. It's just I think nowadays, like I recently saw Raya, you know, from Disney.
Raya?
You know this movie Raya.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Um, Recently, Disney on the streaming service Disney Plus, they published a movie called Raya. Um,
And the Last
it's the
Dragon?
closest thing yeah, Raya and the Last Dragon.
Oh, I have
And
not seen it. Yeah.
surprisingly, I think it's the first time that I see that something coming from Disney is closer to the experience of watching a Ghibli movie.
Okay.
The meaning and the storytelling, it reminds me a lot of, you know, Ghibli movies. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
How do you came across Ghibli movies?
I think the first movie that I saw was Shihiro's what's the name in Spanish it's El viaje de Shihiro. Shihiro's I don't
Yeah,
know what's the name in
Spirit
English.
Away.
Spirit Away, yeah. Yeah. Like the first time I watched that I was like this is very different. Like it like I didn't know what it was but it just felt very different from anything.
I had a book here somewhere. Let me see if I can find it somewhere. I'm going to try doing something here. Uh, I have my books right behind all of these, and yeah. Oh, I just found my old credit card. Oh my god, this is what it was. I was looking for that like months ago. It was
Crazy.
the so this is the art of Spirit Away. Yeah, this is
Whoa.
an amazing movie, man. This is yeah, this is I bought this on Amazon, and you know, you can see the artwork, and yeah,
That's
see
really really
there
cool.
so many beautiful things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, that's amazing.
incredibly lower price. I'm not sure why. Um, It was like a used book, was lower priced.
Oh, nice, nice. Which is your favorite movie?
The Mononoke Princess
Mm.
was mind blowing the first time I saw it, and I still believe, for me at least, so amazing. Spirited Away is just amazing as well. It's
Yeah,
incredibly piece of artwork. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not sure. I'm like between Princess Mononoke and Princess um the Princess of the Wind. What's the name of that movie?
Uh,
You know, the one that
Princess. Oh, Nausicaa.
Nausicaa. Yes,
Yeah.
and like both of them are like so cool and like yeah, like just mind blowing.
they're, it's kind of similar. They're kind of similar, actually. Like
Yeah,
it's like a similar universe, actually. Yeah. It's Nausicaa was, I think, 5 years before, or like 7 years before. I don't quite remember. It was one of the first ones. Yeah.
yeah. Did you watch the documentary of Miyazaki, um, Kingdom? What was it? The
Oh my
name?
God, I remember watching documentaries, but not so sure if is one in particular that you're referring to.
Yeah, there's one in particular. I cannot remember the name for some reason. Kingdom of the Heart. No, what that I think I'm confusing with something else, but something about Kingdom. And I'm pretty sure if you like look for Hayao Miyazaki Kingdom, that there's definitely
Okay,
gonna be something.
okay.
And he talks about that. It's
Maybe
when
there's
he
on YouTube or
retires.
something.
Yeah, yeah, like he retires, right? And like he recently came back to like make a new movie. I don't know if you know about that, like the new movie that's gonna come out some years from now.
Oh, I didn't know about that. It's a new, but it's like 2D or 3D.
So I think it's gonna be 2D. I think there was like a short film about a caterpillar,
Hmm.
and that was in 3D. I think.
Hmm. I need to check. Yeah, I need to check. I haven't seen anything about it. Yeah. The last thing
Yeah.
I saw was the last thing I saw was the charm film for the cab boss. Um,
Oh yeah.
yeah, which is, I think, I think I saw it on YouTube. Is there? I think it's kind of pirate. But someone posted on YouTube last year. I think was really 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 cool.
Nice. Yeah. Like yeah. I don't know if you want to keep talking or you want to.
Oh yeah, maybe we can try closing right now. If
Okay.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah, because I could keep talking like forever, but like we
No, yeah,
probably have things to do.
I had a meeting. It's on the 7th of Chile, but I had to get ready into something first.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah. It was definitely a
Man,
pleasure.
it's been a pleasure, man. Really.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. This is so great.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it's the pleasure is mine to have you here. Really, it was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, and really happy that you decided to do this. Hopefully, you can get a bunch of other, you know, people, and other people can get to know your content. I think this is really cool. Um, yeah, thanks a lot for that, and maybe in the future we can talk again and more about Ghibli.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
pretty cool for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.